And let's continue with the first chapter of the second book of A Tale of Two Cities. The book is called The Golden Thread. The chapter is called 5 Years Later, and we have had a description of what Tellson's Bank looks like in the year 1780, and also of the man who runs errands for the bank and his son, Mr. and Masters Cruncher, and we have also, in this scene, been introduced to his wife, Praying, who both Mr. Cruncher and his son are kind of contemptuous of.
"Worth no more than that," repeated Mr. Cruncher. "They ain't worth much then, whether or no. I won't be prayed again, I tell you. I can't afford it. I'm not going to be made unlucky by your sneaking. If you must go flopping yourself down, flop in favour of your husband and child, and not in opposition to 'em. If I had had any but an unnatural wife, and this poor boy had any but an unnatural mother, I might have made some money last week instead of being counter-prayed and counterminded and religiously circumvented into the worst of luck. Bust me," said Mr. Cruncher, who all this time had been putting on his clothes, "if I ain't, what with piety and one blowed thing and another, been choused this last week, and into bad luck at every poor devil of an honest tradesman met with. Young Jerry, dress yourself, my boy, and while I clean my boots, keep an eye upon your mother now and then, and if you see any signs of more flopping, give me a call, for I tell you," here he addressed his wife once more, "I won't be gone again in this manner. I am as rickety as a hackney coach. I am as sleepy as laudanum. My lines is strained to that degree that I shouldn't know, if it wasn't for the pain in 'em, which was me, and which was somebody, which somebody else. Yet I'm done the better for in the pocket, and it's my suspicion that you've been at it from morning to night to prevent me from being better for it in pocket, and I won't put up with it. Egger away at her, and what do you say now?" Growling in addition such phrases as, "Ah, yes, you're religious too. You wouldn't put yourself in opposition to the interest of your husband and child, would you? Not you," and throwing off other sarcastic sparks from the whirling grindstone of his indignation, Mr. Cruncher betook himself to his boot cleaning and his general preparations for business. In the meantime, his son, whose head was garnished with tenderer spikes, and whose young eyes stood close by one another as his father's did, kept the required watch upon his mother. He greatly disturbed the poor woman at intervals by darting out of his sleeping closet, where he made his toilet with a surprised cry of, "You're going to flop, mother! Hello, father!" and raising this fictitious alarm, darting in again with an undutiful grin. Mr. Cruncher's temper was not at all improved when he came to his breakfast. He resented Mrs. Cruncher's saying grace with particular animosity. "Now, Agawayata, what are you up to? At it again?" His wife explained that she had merely asked a blessing. "Don't do it," said Mr. Cruncher, looking about as if he rather expected to see the loaf disappear under the efficacy of his wife's petitions. "I am going to be blessed out of house and home. I won't have my whittles blew off of my table. Keep still." Exceedingly red-eyed and grim, as if he had been up all night at a party which had taken anything but a convivial turn, Jerry Cruncher worried his breakfast rather than ate it, growling over it like a four-footed inmate of a menagerie. Toward 9 o'clock he smoothed his ruffled aspect, and, presenting as respectable and businesslike an exterior as he could overlay his natural self with, issued forth to the occupation of the day. It could scarcely be called a trade, in spite of his favourite description of himself as a honest tradesman. His stock consisted of a wooden stool made out of a broken-back chair cut down
which stool young Jerry, walking at his father's side, carried every morning to beneath the banking-house window that was nearest Temple Bar, where, with addition of the first handful of straw that could be gleaned from any passing vehicle, to keep the cold and wet from the odd job man's feet, it formed the encampment for the day. On this post of his, Mr. Cruncher was well known to Fleet Street and the Temple as the bar itself, and was almost as ill-looking, encamped at 9:15, in good time to touch his three-cornered hat to the oldest of men as they passed into Tellson's. Jerry took up his station on this windy March morning, with young Jerry standing by him. When not engaged in making forays through the bar to inflict bodily and mental injuries of an acute description on passing boys who were small enough for his amiable purpose, father and son, extremely like each other, looking silently on at the morning traffic in Fleet Street, with their two heads as near to one another as the two eyes of each were, bore a considerable resemblance to a pair of monkeys. The resemblance was not lessened by the accidental circumstance that the mature Jerry bit and spat out straw, while the twinkling eyes of the youthful Jerry were as restlessly watchful of him as of everything in Fleet Street. The head of one of the regular indoor messengers attached to Tellerson's establishment was put through the door, and a word was given. "Porter wanted." "Hooray, father! Here's an early job to begin with." Having thus given his parent Godspeed, young Jerry seated himself on the stool, entered on his reversionary interest in the straw his father had been chewing, and cogitated. "Always rusty. His fingers is always rusty," muttered young Jerry. "Where does my father get all that iron rust from? He don't get no iron rust here." And that's the end of chapter 1.